Welcome, traveller, to this quiet place, where we gather stories from the ruins of Hallownest. Tonight we will sit together in the gentle dark and tell the tales of the bugs who lived and wandered and loved and lost in that kingdom beneath the earth. Not the grand and terrible stories of kings and gods and plagues, though those will weave through everything we say, but the quieter stories, the smaller ones, the ones about a map maker who hummed while he worked, about a warrior who carried a flower across a kingdom for someone who could not carry it herself, about an old stag who ran his routes long after every passenger was gone, about a knight who guarded a sewer with the same devotion he had once given to a throne. These are the stories that live in the margins of Hallownest's history, in the spaces between the grand tragedies, and they are in their own way the truest record of what the kingdom was, because a civilization is not defined only by its kings and its catastrophes, but by the ordinary lives that filled its streets and its tunnels, by the bugs who woke each morning and went about their work and came home and slept and did it again, who built their small happinesses in the shadow of something vast and fragile and doomed. If these stories help you find rest, if the slow telling of Hallownest's quieter truths guides you gently towards sleep, I would be grateful if you would consider subscribing, not for the numbers, but because there are others out there who need these stories told slowly and carefully and with love, and subscribing helps them find their way here. It helps the algorithm understand that not everything needs to be fast and loud, that sometimes the best thing a voice can do is speak quietly about something beautiful and broken until the person listening falls asleep. But whether you subscribe or not, you are welcome here. The stories will unfold the same. Now let your breathing slow, let your shoulders drop, let your jaw unclench and your hands uncurl, and let us begin with the village above the kingdom, with the place where all journeys into Hallownest begin, and where the few who survive those journeys eventually return. Dirtmouth sits above the well that leads down into Hallownest, a small collection of buildings perched on the surface of the world, exposed to the sky and the wind and the weather that the underground kingdom never knew. It was never a grand place, never a city, never anything more than a way station, a gathering point for those who were about to descend and those who had just returned, a village that existed because the well existed, that had no purpose beyond its proximity to the entrance to the kingdom below. In the days when Hallownest was alive, when the kingdom hummed with commerce and culture, and the movement of thousands of conscious bugs going about their daily lives, Dirtmouth would have been busier. It would have seen travellers arriving and departing, would have had inns and shops, and the kind of modest infrastructure that grows up around any point of transit, any place where people pause before continuing on to somewhere else. But even then, Dirtmouth was small, it was peripheral, it was a village that existed at the edge of something, rather than at its centre, and the bugs who lived there permanently were the ones who chose the edge, who preferred the quiet of the surface to the bustle of the kingdom below, who found something in the open sky and the cool air that the underground could not provide. Now Dirtmouth is nearly empty. The buildings stand, but their doors are closed, their windows dark, their inhabitants gone. They descended into Hallownest one by one over the years, drawn by curiosity or duty, or the strange pull that the kingdom exerts on those who know it exists, and none of them have returned. The village has the specific quality of a place that has been abandoned gradually, rather than all at once. Not the sudden emptiness of a disaster, but the slow draining of a community that lost its members one at a time, each departure making the next one more likely, each empty house making the remaining inhabitants feel a little more alone, a little more aware of the silence, a little more conscious of the fact that they are staying in a place that everyone else has left. Elderbug remains. He sits on his bench near the well, the last permanent resident of Dirtmouth, an old bug who has watched his community empty out around him, and who lacks the courage, or the strength, or perhaps simply the desire to follow them down. Elderbug is not a warrior, not an adventurer, not a scholar or a knight, or anyone who might have a reason to descend into the ruins of a fallen kingdom. He is simply an old bug who lives in a village, who has always lived in this village, who remembers when there were others here, and who has adjusted, with the particular resilience of the elderly, to the fact that there are no others here now. He talks to anyone who passes through. He is grateful for any conversation, any company, any brief interruption of the silence that has become the primary feature of his daily life. He offers advice that is sometimes useful and sometimes not. He shares observations about the well and the weather and the state of the village, and he speaks with the combination of warmth and weariness that characterizes someone who has been alone for a long time, but has not allowed that aloneness to make him unkind. Let your body sink deeper into the comfort of your bed now. Let the weight of the blanket settle over you. Let your breathing become slower and more regular as we sit with Elderbug for a moment and appreciate what he represents in the larger story of Hallownest. Elderbug's loneliness is not dramatic. It is not the loneliness of a king in a white palace or a queen bound by roots in a garden. It is the ordinary, everyday loneliness of being the last one left, of outliving your community, of watching the world around you empty out while you remain, unable or unwilling to follow, unable or unwilling to leave the place you have always known, even though that place has become a monument to absence. Elderbug does not understand the grand narrative of Hallownest's fall. He does not know about the radiance, or the infection, or the Pale King's vessels, or the dreamer's sacrifice. He knows only that the people he knew are gone, that the village is quiet, that the well leads somewhere dangerous, and that he is still here, sitting on his bench, waiting for someone to talk to. And when the night arrives, when that small, silent figure climbs out of the well and stands in Dirtmouth for the first time, Elderbug is there to greet them. He is there to offer what little he knows. He is there to be the first friendly face in a journey that will have very few friendly faces, and his presence, small and unremarkable as it is, matters, because it means that even in a world where kingdoms fall and gods rage and civilizations consume themselves, there is still a bench, there is still a village, there is still an old bug who will say hello and mean it. If the night brings the flower to Elderbug, if they carry that delicate blossom all the way from the grey mourner, through the hostile tunnels and the dangerous passages, and deliver it not to the intended grave, but to the old bug sitting on his bench, Elderbug is transformed. He holds the flower with a gentleness that suggests he understands, on some level, what it cost to bring it here, and for the first time In perhaps a very long time, he seems happy, genuinely and simply happy. Not because the flower solves any of his problems or changes any of the facts of his situation, but because someone thought of him. Someone made the effort. Someone carried something beautiful through a dangerous world and gave it to an old bug who was sitting alone. The flower does not cure his loneliness. It does not bring back the other residents. It does not change the fact that Dirtmouth is empty and the kingdom below is in ruins. But it sits in his hands like a small piece of proof that the world still contains kindness, that someone out there still cares about an old bug on a bench, and sometimes that is enough. Sometimes a flower is all you need to believe that the world is not entirely broken. Let your eyes stay closed. Let your body become heavier with each breath as we leave Dirtmouth behind and descend into the tunnels below. There we will find another quiet story. The story of a bug who mapped the unmappable, who travelled through the most dangerous places in Hallownest with nothing but a quill and a sheet of parchment and the cheerful humming of someone who genuinely enjoys their work. Cornifer is a cartographer, a map maker, a bug who has dedicated his life to the documentation of physical space, to the translation of tunnels and chambers and passages into lines on paper, to the creation of records that allow others to navigate places they have never been. He can be found throughout Hallownest, in every major region, sitting in some relatively safe corner with his papers spread around him, humming to himself as he works. And his humming is one of the most distinctive and most comforting sounds in the entire game. A gentle, melodic murmur that you can hear before you see him, that guides you through unfamiliar territory toward the one bug in the area who can help you understand where you are and where you might go. Cornifer's humming is not nervous, not forced, not the humming of someone trying to keep their courage up in a dangerous place. It is the genuine, unself-conscious humming of someone who is absorbed in their work, who finds pleasure in the act of mapping, who is so focused on the task of translating the physical world into cartographic notation that the dangers around him become for the moment secondary to the satisfaction of getting the proportions right, of capturing the way a tunnel curves or a chamber opens up, of representing on paper the reality of a space that has never been represented before. Cornifer's wife Iselda runs the shop in Dirtmouth, where the knight can purchase the maps that Cornifer has completed. Iselda is tall and elegant and slightly melancholy. She sighs frequently, a soft sound of resignation, or perhaps longing, that punctuates her conversations like a gentle refrain. Iselda worries about Cornifer. She misses him when he's away. She wishes he would spend more time at home and less time in the dangerous tunnels below. But she also respects his work, understands his passion, knows that mapping is not just what he does but who he is, and she sells his maps with the quiet pride of someone who knows that the work is good, that the maps are accurate, that her husband's dedication to his craft produces something of genuine value. The relationship between Cornifer and Iselda is one of the gentlest things in Hollow Knight. A marriage that persists through difficulty, through separation, through the collapse of the kingdom around them, sustained by mutual respect and quiet affection, and the shared understanding that some things are worth doing, even when the doing of them is hard. Cornifer has been everywhere. He has mapped the fungal wastes where the mushrooms release spores that drift through the air like thoughts dissolving. He has mapped Deep Nest, that place of darkness and silk and predatory creatures, and the fact that he survived Deepness long enough to map it is itself a testament to something, to luck, or to skill, or to the strange protection that sometimes seems to surround people who are so thoroughly focused on their work that the world's dangers simply pass around them, like water around a stone. He has mapped the crystal peak where the miners dug and the crystals grew and the light hummed at frequencies too low to hear. He has mapped the city of tears where the rain falls endlessly through the cavern ceiling and the architecture rises, elegant and sorrowful, into the darkness above. Everywhere you go in Hallownest, Cornifer has been there first. He has sat in some corner and hummed and drawn and produced a document that makes the incomprehensible navigable, the terrifying manageable. The vast and overwhelming becomes simply a series of rooms connected by passages, each one documented, each one recorded, each one given its proper place on a sheet of paper that you can hold in your hands and understand. Let your breathing become even slower now. Let the rhythm of it carry you closer to the edge of sleep as we turn to another quiet story. The story of a bug who came to Hallownest from somewhere else, who carried a mask that was not his own, who remembered nothing about why he was there or what he was supposed to do, and who found in the ruins of a kingdom he did not remember something that resembled peace. Quirrell arrives in Hallownest with no clear memory of why he has come. He carries Monomon's mask, the mask of the teacher, one of the 3 dreamers who sealed themselves in eternal sleep to maintain the locks on the Temple of the Black Egg. This mask was given to him by Monomon herself, placed in his care as part of a plan that he does not remember, a plan that involves the eventual breaking of the seal and the confrontation with the radiance that the seal was meant to delay. Quirrell does not know any of this when he arrives. He knows only that something has drawn him back to Hallownest, some instinct or compulsion or deeply buried instruction that he cannot articulate, something that manifests as a feeling rather than a thought, as a pull rather than a plan, as the vague but insistent sense that there is somewhere he needs to be and something he needs to do, even though he cannot remember what or where or why. The knight encounters Quirrell at several points throughout their journey, and each encounter is a small moment of warmth in a world that is otherwise cold. A brief conversation in the midst of a long silence. A reminder that not everything in Hallownest is hostile or corrupted or broken beyond repair. Quirrell is kind, he is curious, he is genuinely interested in the world around him, despite, or perhaps because of, his inability to remember his connection to it. He observes the ruins of Hallownest with the eyes of someone seeing them for the first time. He notices details that a native might overlook and comments on the beauty of places that their inhabitants took for granted. And his observations are tinged with a sadness that he does not fully understand, a recognition that what he is looking at was once something more, something alive and vibrant and full of purpose, and that what remains is only the echo of that vitality, the shell of a world that has lost its centre. At the entrance to the City of Tears, Quirrell sits on a bench in the rain, looking out over the cityscape, and his dialogue there is one of the most peaceful moments in the entire game, a quiet reflection on the beauty of a place that is beautiful even in its ruin, even in its emptiness, even in the perpetual tears that fall from the cavern ceiling and give the city its name. Quirrell does not try to explain the city or to analyse its fall. He simply sits and looks and acknowledges that it is beautiful, that the rain is gentle, that the architecture is elegant, that there is something worth noticing here, even if the noticing cannot change anything, even if the beauty is the beauty of something that is already gone. This moment, this small moment of a bug sitting on a bench in the rain and finding something to appreciate, is the kind of moment that Hallownest's grand narrative often obscures. The kind of moment that gets lost in the shadow of gods and plagues and kingdoms falling. But it is real. It happened. A bug sat on a bench and watched the rain and was moved by what he saw. And that matters. That is part of the record too. Quirrell is also a skilled fighter, carries a nail with quiet competence, and helps the knight at critical moments, most notably in the battle against Umu in the Teacher's Archives, where Quirrell strikes the jellyfish creature's membrane to create openings for the knight to attack. This moment is significant because it reveals Quirrell's connection to Monomon's archives, his instinctive understanding of how to navigate this place, his body remembering what his mind has forgotten, his skills and his knowledge surfacing through the amnesia, like stones emerging from receding water. Quirrell fights not with aggression but with purpose, strikes not with rage but with the calm precision of someone who knows exactly what needs to be done even if he cannot explain how he knows it. And when the fight is over, when Umu is defeated and the path to Monomon is clear, Quirrell stands in the archives and something shifts in him. Something recognizes this place. Something connects to the memories he has been carrying without knowing he was carrying them. When the time comes to break Monomon's seal, Quirrell helps the knight kill his teacher. He assists in the death of the being who created him, who gave him purpose, who sent him away with her mask as part of a plan that she knew would end in her death. And he does this because he understands finally what he was sent to do, understands that Monomon planned for this moment, arranged for it, ensured that when the time came, there would be someone here who could help, someone who carried enough of her will to see the thing through, even though seeing it through meant ending her. Quirrell's participation in Monomon's death is an act of love as much as it is an act of duty, is the fulfillment of a promise he did not know he had made, the completion of a mission he did not know he was on, and the grief that accompanies it is the grief of someone who has lost the centre of their existence, the organising principle around which their entire life was constructed, the person who made them what they are, and then asked them to unmake her. After Monomon's death, Quirrell goes to the Blue Lake, that vast body of water above the City of Tears, where the cavern opens up and the air is cool and clean, and the surface of the lake reflects the pale light of the ceiling in ripples that shift and change and never quite repeat. Quirrell sits on the shore. He leaves his nail behind, leaning against a post, its blade reflecting the blue light of the water. And then he is gone. The game never tells us what happened to him. It never shows us where he went. It never explains whether he walked into the water or walked away from it, whether his departure was an ending or a beginning, whether he found peace or simply found the limit of what he could carry and set it down. Let your muscles relax completely now. Let the tension drain from every part of your body. Let your thoughts become softer and less defined as we sit by the blue lake for a moment, and let the water be still. Let us accept that some stories do not have clear endings, that some departures are not explained, that sometimes a person simply leaves their weapon on the shore and goes, and the world that remains has to decide for itself what that means. Quirrell's nail stays by the lake, reflecting light, marking the place where he was last seen. And whether his absence is tragedy or liberation, or something that cannot be captured by either word, it is part of the record, part of Hallownest's story, part of the quiet archive of lives that were lived and then were not, of bugs who came and went and left behind only the smallest traces of their presence, a nail by a lake, a memory of kindness, the echo of a voice that once said something thoughtful about rain. Now let us follow the paths that wind through Hallownest's wilder places, through the regions where civilization thinned and the natural world reasserted itself, where the Pale King's influence diminished and older ways of living persisted, and let us tell the story of the nail masters, those three brothers who mastered the art of the nail and then, each in his own way, set the art aside. The nail is the weapon of Hallownest, the standard armament of its knights and its guards and its warriors, a blade that channels the will of its wielder into strikes that can cut through shell and stone and the hardened bodies of infected creatures. The nail is simple in concept but complex in execution, and the mastery of its use was studied and refined over generations, producing techniques and philosophies and schools of combat that treated the nail not merely as a tool for fighting, but as an expression of something deeper, something about the relationship between a bug and the world it moves through, between intention and action, between stillness and the decisive moment when stillness becomes motion. The three nail masters, Oro, Matto and Shio, were students of the great nail sage Sly, the greatest living practitioner of the nail arts, and each of them learned from Sly a different aspect of combat, a different philosophy of the blade, a different way of understanding what it means to strike. Oro retreated to Kingdom's Edge, the windy, desolate region at the furthest reach of Hallownest, where the Pale King's civilization petered out against the cliffs and the howling emptiness beyond. Oro is bitter, is sharp-tongued, is the kind of bug who has been disappointed by the world, often enough that disappointment has become his default state, his resting position, the expression he wears when he is not actively being surprised by something. He teaches the dash/slash, a technique of aggressive forward momentum, of closing distance with devastating speed, of committing entirely to the attack and trusting that the commitment itself will carry you through. The dash/slash is Oro's philosophy made physical, the belief that the only way to survive is to move forward, to attack, to refuse to hesitate or second guess, or hold anything in reserve. Oro charges Geo for his lesson, demands payment before he will share his knowledge, and this transactional approach to teaching reflects something about who he has become, something about the way his bitterness has transformed the sharing of knowledge from a gift into a commodity, from something freely given into something that must be purchased, earned, paid for. Matto lives in the Howling Cliffs, in a small shelter above Dirtmouth, and he is as warm as Oro is cold. Matto teaches the Cyclone Slash, a spinning technique that creates a whirlwind of blade around the wielder, that strikes in every direction at once, that protects and attacks simultaneously. The cyclone slash is Mato's philosophy made physical, the belief that strength comes from openness, from the willingness to engage with everything around you, rather than focusing narrowly on a single target, from the understanding that combat is not a straight line between you and your enemy, but a sphere of awareness that encompasses everything within reach. Mato calls the knight his pupil, his student, uses terms of endearment and encouragement that suggest a bug who finds genuine joy in teaching, who sees in the act of passing on knowledge a purpose that transcends the loneliness of his isolated dwelling, that gives meaning to the skills he has spent his life developing. Mato's warmth is not naive, is not the warmth of someone who does not understand the darkness of the world, but the warmth of someone who understands it perfectly and has chosen warmth anyway, has decided that being kind is more important than being protected, that the vulnerability of caring is worth the risk of being hurt. Sheo, the third brother, lives in Greenpath, and Sheo has done something that neither Oro nor Mato has done. He has stopped fighting. Sheo was a nail master, was one of the 3 finest students of the greatest nail sage in Hallownest, was trained in the art of the blade to a level of mastery that very few bugs have ever achieved, and he put his nail down. He picked up a paintbrush. He became an artist, traded the discipline of combat for the discipline of creation, exchanged the philosophy of the strike for the philosophy of the brushstroke, and in doing so he found something that fighting could never give him, a way of engaging with the world that did not require the world to be an enemy, a way of expressing himself that did not require the destruction of something else, a way of being skilled that produced beauty rather than violence. Shio teaches the great slash, a technique of patience and timing, of holding the blade still and waiting for the precise moment to release its energy in a single devastating strike. And the great slash is the technique that most clearly bridges Sheo's 2 vocations, because it is about waiting, about stillness, about the discipline of not acting until the moment is right. And these are the same qualities that make a good painter, the same patience, the same stillness, the same understanding that the most powerful thing you can do is sometimes nothing, is sometimes simply standing still and watching and waiting for the world to show you where the brushstroke should go. If the knight spares the nailsmith, if they refuse to strike him down when he asks for death, the nailsmith eventually finds his way to Sheo's studio in Greenpath, and the 2 of them are found together, the painter and the smith, the creator of beauty and the creator of weapons, and there is something between them that the game does not name but does not need to name, something gentle and mutual and warm, something that suggests 2 bugs who have each spent their lives in solitary dedication to their craft and who have found, late and unexpectedly, that solitary dedication is not the only way to live, that skill can be shared, that mastery does not require loneliness, that the best thing a life of discipline can produce is not a perfect painting or a perfect nail, but the capacity to sit beside another person and be at peace. Let your breathing slow even further. Let your eyes grow heavier behind their closed lids as we carry this image with us. 2 craftsmen in a studio in Greenpath, one painting and one watching, both of them quiet, both of them content, both of them proof that even in a kingdom of ruins and loss, it is possible to find someone. It is possible to be found. Now let us walk deeper into the kingdom, into the fungal wastes, that strange and humid region where the mushrooms grow tall and thick, and the air is heavy with spores, and the sound of dripping water, and the distant rhythmic pulse of fungal colonies breathing in their slow, vegetative way. The fungal wastes are not part of Hallownest in the way that the City of Tears or the Crystal Peak are part of Hallownest. They are adjacent to the kingdom rather than within it, a region that the Pale King civilization acknowledged but never fully incorporated, a place where different rules applied, where different forms of consciousness operated, where the gift of mind that the Pale King gave to the bugs of Hallownest had been received differently, had been interpreted through the particular biology of mushroom and fungus, and the strange networked intelligence that fungal colonies develop when they are left to grow without interference. The mushroom clan lives in the wastes, communicating through spores rather than through speech, sharing thoughts and memories and experiences through the chemical language of fungal networks that connect individual mushrooms into something larger, something collective, something that is neither the individual consciousness that the Pale King gave his subjects, nor the unified dreaming that the Radiance imposed upon hers, but a third way, a form of awareness that is distributed, that exists in the connections between individuals rather than in the individuals themselves, that operates through exchange rather than through hierarchy, through the constant, gentle sharing of information, rather than through the imposition of a single will upon many minds. The mushroom clan is largely resistant to the infection, because their form of consciousness does not provide the kind of foothold that the Radiance needs, does not have the individual minds that she can enter through dreams, does not maintain the separation between self and other that the infection exploits to spread from bug to bug. The mushrooms simply share, and in sharing they dilute whatever the Radiance sends into their network, distribute it across so many nodes that it never reaches the concentration necessary to corrupt any single one. Mr. Mushroom is perhaps the strangest character in all of Hollow Knight, a large mushroom with a face who appears in various locations throughout Hallownest, and speaks in cryptic, fragmentary phrases that seem to reference things beyond the game's own narrative, things outside the world, things that break the boundary between the story and whatever exists beyond the story. Mr. Mushroom speaks of a world above, of skies and stars and the surface of the earth, speaks in terms that suggest he is aware of the layers of reality that no other character in the game acknowledges, and his final appearance, if the night finds him in every location, shows him sprouting wings and flying upward, rising out of Hallownest entirely, departing the underground kingdom for the surface world above. Mr. Mushroom's dialogue is deliberately enigmatic, is designed to be puzzling rather than informative, to raise questions rather than to answer them, and his presence in the game serves as a reminder that Hallownest, for all its complexity, for all its intricately constructed lore and carefully developed history, exists within a larger world that the game only hints at, a world of surface and sky and sun that the bugs of Hallownest may never have known, that the Pale King may never have seen, that exists above everything the way the void exists below, vast and unknowable and patient. Let your body become even heavier now. Let the bed hold you more completely. Let your breathing find a rhythm that requires no thought. no effort, no attention. As we leave the fungal wastes and travel to the Mantis village, where we will find a different kind of story. A story about honor and discipline, and the particular kind of strength that comes from knowing exactly who you are and refusing to be anything else. The Mantis tribe maintained their independence throughout the entire history of Hallownest, accepted the Pale King's gift of mind, but refused to be absorbed into his civilization, kept their own culture and their own values and their own territory and their own way of life. The Mantises are warriors, are fighters of extraordinary skill and discipline, and their village is organized around the principle of combat as a form of expression, as a way of communicating, as the primary mechanism through which mantises determine status and resolve disputes and demonstrate their worthiness to belong. The Mantis Lords, the three leaders of the tribe, sit on their thrones in the deepest chamber of the village, and when the night arrives, when the night enters their territory and demonstrates sufficient skill to reach their chamber, the Mantis Lords rise and fight, not because the night is an enemy, but because fighting is how the Mantises recognize worth, is how they determine whether a stranger deserves their respect, is the language they use to say, "We see you, and we take you seriously." The fight with the Mantis Lords is one of the most beloved encounters in Hollow Knight, because of how it operates on multiple levels simultaneously. On the surface, it is a boss fight, a test of the player's skill and timing and ability to read attack patterns. But beneath the surface, it is a conversation, a dialogue conducted in the language of combat, a mutual exchange of respect between the knight and the leaders of a tribe that values martial ability above all else. The Mantis Lords fight with precision, with elegance, with a clarity of movement that reflects the clarity of their philosophy. And when the knight defeats them, when the knight demonstrates that it can match their skill and survive their assault, the Mantis Lords bow. They bow to the knight, a gesture of recognition that is all the more powerful for its rarity, for the understanding that the Mantises do not bow to anyone, do not acknowledge the superiority of any being, do not bend their pride for kings or gods or any force that cannot earn their respect through the demonstration of actual ability. The bow of the Mantis Lords is one of the most earned and most meaningful moments in the game, a reward that is not a power-up or a charm or a piece of equipment, but simply the acknowledgement of one warrior by another, the recognition that the knight is worthy. After the Mantis Lords bow, the Mantis warriors throughout the village become passive, no longer attack the knight, stand at their posts and watch the knight pass with the quiet respect of soldiers acknowledging a superior officer. The paths through the village open, the Mantises step aside, and the knight is granted safe passage through their territory. Not because the Mantises have been defeated or subjugated or forced into compliance, but because they have chosen, freely and according to their own values, to accept the knight as an equal, to extend to the knight the courtesy they extend to those who have proven themselves worthy. This is the Mantis way, the Mantis philosophy, the understanding that respect must be earned through action rather than demanded through authority, that the only hierarchy worth recognizing is the hierarchy of demonstrated ability, that a king's crown means nothing to a warrior who has not seen the king fight. The Mantis Lords also serve as guardians of the passage to Deepnest. that dark and dangerous region below the village where the spiders dwell, and the tunnels close in, and the air becomes thick with silk and the sense of being watched. When the infection came to Hallownest, the Mantis Lords sealed the entrance to Deepnest, blocked the passage, and maintained their vigilance, keeping their village free of the infection through discipline and isolation, and the sheer, stubborn refusal to allow anything they did not choose to allow. The mantises who disagreed with this policy, who believed the tribe should accept the infection or should pursue a different path, were exiled, were cast out and condemned to live as the traitor lord's followers in the Queen's gardens, punished for their dissent with permanent banishment from the tribe and from the only community they had ever known. The Mantis Lord's honour is real, their code is genuine, their discipline is admirable, but it was maintained through exclusion, through the willingness to cut away anything that did not conform, through the understanding that unity sometimes requires the expulsion of those who disagree, and the traitor lord and his followers pay the price of that understanding, living and dying in exile, never forgiven, never allowed to return home. Let your consciousness begin to drift now. Let the boundary between waking and sleeping blur at the edges. Let your thoughts become softer and less structured as we move from their Mantis village to a place that most of Hallownest preferred to forget. A sealed kingdom within the kingdom, a realm of wax and honey and devoted service that existed in its own bubble of continuity while the world outside it fell apart. The hive is a self-contained community of bees, ruled by the massive hive queen Vesper, who maintained absolute authority over her subject through a combination of devotion and biological imperative, creating a society that functioned with perfect efficiency, that operated as a single organism rather than as a collection of individuals, that hummed with the constant activity of bees producing honey and maintaining structures and serving their queen with a dedication that left no room for doubt, for dissent, for any of the individual thought and choice that the Pale King's gift of mind had made possible elsewhere in Hallownest. The hive sealed itself off when the infection came, closed its borders, withdrew from the kingdom, and the bees within continued their routines, producing and building and serving and existing in a state that was technically uninfected but also unchanging, a perpetual cycle of activity that had no destination, no evolution, no future beyond the endless repetition of the same tasks by the same bees in the same chambers day after day after day. Hive Queen Vesper herself is enormous, a massive figure that dominates the central chamber of the hive, and she is dead by the time the night arrives, her body preserved in the wax and honey of her realm, her court still active around her, the bees still serving, still working, still maintaining the routines they established during her reign, even though the queen who gave those routines their purpose is no longer alive to benefit from them. The hive knight guards Vesper's body with ferocious dedication, attacks anyone who approaches the queen's chamber, fights with the desperate intensity of a soldier who has nothing left to protect except the body of the ruler he was sworn to serve, and his fight is both impressive and heartbreaking, a demonstration of loyalty that has outlived its object, of devotion that has become indistinguishable from habit, of a warrior who continues to guard because guarding is what he does, because stopping would mean acknowledging that there is nothing left to guard, and that acknowledgement would be more than he can bear. The honey of the hive has preservative properties, keeps things in a state of suspension, prevents decay and change and the natural processes that break things down over time, and this preservative quality is a metaphor for the hive itself, a community that has been preserved in its own routines, kept in a state of suspension that prevents growth as effectively as it prevents decay, maintained in an equilibrium that is stable but stagnant, unchanging but also unalive in the way that only unchanging things can be unalive. The bees of the hive are not infected, are not corrupted, are not suffering in the way that so many of Hallownest's citizens are suffering, but they are also not free, are not growing, are not experiencing the kind of conscious existence that the Pale King's gift of mind was supposed to make possible. They are preserved, perfectly and permanently, in a state of devoted service that has no object, and the hum of their industry fills the chambers of the hive like a lullaby that no one is listening to, a song of purpose sung in a place where purpose has become purely mechanical, purely habitual, purely the continuation of something that was once meaningful and is now simply continuous. Sleep draws closer now. You can feel it at the edges of your awareness, a gentle pressure behind your eyes, a softening of the world's edges, and as it approaches, let us tell the story of Cloth, the warrior who came to Hallownest seeking something that most creatures spend their lives avoiding. Cloth is a large, sturdy bug who has travelled to Hallownest from somewhere beyond the kingdom's borders, drawn not by curiosity or duty, but by a specific and singular desire, the desire for a glorious death. Cloth is a warrior, carries a weapon, fights with courage and determination, and she has come to Hallownest because Hallownest is dangerous, because the kingdom's ruins are filled with powerful creatures and deadly environments, and the kind of opponents that can provide the death she is looking for, a death in combat, a death with meaning, a death that proves her life was worth something, because she spent the ending of it fighting something worthy of the fight. Cloth's philosophy is not suicidal in the modern clinical sense, is not driven by despair or depression, or the desire to escape suffering. It is driven by a worldview that values the manner of one's death as the ultimate measure of one's life, that believes a warrior is defined by their final battle, that sees a death in combat against a worthy opponent as the highest possible achievement, the culmination of everything a fighter has trained for and worked toward and become. The knight encounters Cloth at several points throughout Hallownest, and at each encounter Cloth is in some kind of difficulty, is facing enemies that are giving her trouble, is struggling but not surrendering, is fighting with the grim determination of someone who knows that every fight might be the last one and wants the last one to be good. If the knight helps Cloth, if they intervene in her battles and assist her in surviving encounters that might otherwise have killed her, Cloth grows stronger, becomes more confident, develops a fondness for the knight that is expressed in the warm, bluff way of a warrior who does not do sentiment, but who recognizes a fellow fighter and respects the bond that shared combat creates. Cloth does not need saving, does not want to be rescued, does not see the knight's assistance as anything other than what it is, one warrior helping another, the natural cooperation of fighters who recognize each other's worth. If Cloth survives to reach the Queen's gardens, if the knight has helped her through enough encounters that she makes it to the final battle with the traitor lord, Cloth arrives at the fight at the critical moment, leaps into the arena, and attacks the traitor lord with everything she has, fighting alongside the knight in a desperate, furious assault on one of the most powerful enemies in the kingdom. And Cloth dies. She dies fighting the traitor lord, is struck down in the middle of the battle, is killed by the enemy she came to face, and her death is exactly what she wanted, exactly what she travelled to Hallownest to find. A glorious end in combat against a worthy opponent. A final battle that proved her courage and her strength and her willingness to spend her life on something she believed in. Cloth dies happy, dies satisfied, dies with the knowledge that her death meant something, that she contributed to the defeat of a powerful enemy, that her final act was one of bravery and sacrifice and the warrior's honour she spent her life pursuing. If the knight does not help Cloth, if they do not assist her in the earlier encounters, Cloth does not die in the Queen's gardens. She survives, but she's not satisfied, has not found the death she came for, has not experienced the glorious ending she sought. And she remains in Dirtmouth, waiting, restless, unfulfilled, a warrior without a final battle, a life without the ending it was oriented toward. This outcome, this survival, is presented as the less satisfying of the two, the lesser reward, the path that leaves Cloth alive but incomplete, and the game's framing of this is itself quietly unsettling. The suggestion that sometimes death is better than survival, that sometimes the ending someone chooses for themselves is more respectful than the safety imposed upon them by others, that Cloth's desire for a meaningful death deserves to be honoured even though honouring it means letting her die. Let your breathing become so slow and so gentle now that you can barely feel it. Let your body become so heavy that it seems to merge with the bed beneath you. As we turn to one of the most beautiful and most heartbreaking stories in all of Hollow Knight, the story of the Grey Mourner and the Flower. Zima is one of the 5 great knights who served the Pale King, a warrior of extraordinary ability who came to Hallownest from somewhere beyond the kingdom's borders, from a land that the game does not name and does not describe, a place that Zima left behind to serve the Pale King and to be part of Hallownest's story. Zima fell in love, not with another knight, not with a figure of power or importance, but with a mantis traitor, one of the mantises who were exiled from the mantis village for refusing to follow the mantis lord's policy of isolation, one of the outcasts who lived in the Queen's gardens, cut off from their tribe, from their community, from everything they had known. Zima's lover was a bug who had been cast out, who lived in exile, who was defined by the community that had rejected her, and Zima loved her anyway, loved her across the boundary between knight and exile, between insider and outcast, between the kingdom's finest warrior and one of its most forgotten citizens. Zima's lover died. The game does not tell us how, does not describe the circumstances of her death, simply presents the fact of it, the absence, the grave in the Queen's gardens where she is buried, the empty space where she used to be, and Zima, the great knight, the warrior who had served the Pale King and fought alongside the other great knights, and possessed combat abilities that placed her among the most formidable beings in Hallownest, was destroyed by this loss, not physically but spiritually, not killed but unmade, reduced from a knight to a mourner, from a warrior to a grieving figure in a cloak who sits in the resting grounds, and weeps, and asks strangers to carry a flower to a grave she cannot visit herself. The delicate flower is exactly what its name describes, a bloom of extraordinary fragility that shatters at the slightest impact, that cannot survive fast travel or damage of any kind, that must be carried through the hostile terrain of Hallownest with absolute care, absolute attention, absolute commitment to its protection. The journey from the Grey Mourner's location to the grave in the Queen's Gardens is long and dangerous, passes through areas filled with enemies and environmental hazards, requires the knight to navigate hostile territory while carrying something that a single mistake will destroy. The flower can be attempted multiple times, can be collected again after each failure, but each failure means returning to the Grey Mourner, collecting a new flower and beginning the journey again, and the repetition of this process, the patient, persistent effort to carry something fragile through a dangerous world, is itself a form of devotion, a physical expression of the care that Zima can no longer provide directly. When the knight successfully delivers the flower to the grave in the Queen's Gardens, Zima weeps with gratitude, and the grave blooms, and the flower takes root in the soil above her lover's remains, and something changes in the Grey Mourner. Some weight lifts, some grief eases, not because the flower solves anything or brings anyone back or changes the fact that the person she loved is dead, but because the gesture has been completed, the devotion has been expressed, the love that Zima still feels has been given a physical form and placed where it belongs, on the grave of the person it was for, carried there by a stranger who did not know the person buried there, but who cared enough to make the journey, who treated the flower with the same care that Zima would have given it, who honoured the love by honouring the fragility of the thing that represented it. Now let us walk into Greenpath, that warm and growing place, the western reaches of Hallownest, where the air is thick with the scent of moss and the sound of water moving through living stone, where the walls are covered in vegetation that grows without sunlight, sustained by something older and deeper than the ordinary processes of photosynthesis, something connected to the ancient being that once made this place its home. Greenpath is the domain of Un, the ancient god of the lake, a being of vast size and gentle nature who resided in the depths of the region long before the Pale King arrived, long before Hallownest was built, long before consciousness was given to the bugs of the underground. Un is a slug god, a being of organic growth and quiet power, and her influence shaped Greenpath into what it is, created the conditions for the lush vegetation that covers every surface, the moss and the vines and the strange beautiful plants that grow in the green darkness, sustained by the lingering power of a god who is now diminished, who is sleeping in the acid lake at the bottom of the region, who is no longer the active, vital force she once was, but whose influence persists, permeates, continues to sustain the growth that she initiated in the ages before memory. The Moss Knights who patrol Greenpath are creatures sustained by Un's power, warriors of moss and plant matter who fight with a slow, deliberate grace that reflects the nature of the god who animates them. They are not aggressive in the way that infected creatures are aggressive, do not attack with the mindless fury of the Radiance's thralls, but defend their territory with the patient determination of guardians who have been given a purpose and who fulfill that purpose regardless of whether the god who gave it to them is still awake to appreciate their service. The Moss Knights are beautiful in their way, their bodies covered in vegetation, their movements like the swaying of branches in a wind that does not exist underground. their presence a reminder that Greenpath belongs to something older than Hallownest, something that was here before the Pale King, will be here after the last trace of his kingdom has crumbled into dust. Urn herself can be found in the acid lake, sleeping, diminished, a massive slug-like being whose body fills the chamber and whose breathing is so slow that each inhalation takes minutes, each exhalation even longer, a rhythm of rest so deep that it is barely distinguishable from the stillness of the stone around her. Un is not dead, is not gone, is simply resting in the way that ancient beings rest, in cycles measured not in hours or days but in geological ages, in spans of time so vast that the rise and fall of Hallownest is merely a moment, a brief flicker of activity in the long, slow breathing of a god who has been here since before the concept of kingdoms existed, and who will be here long after the concept has been forgotten. If the knight wears the Defender's Crest charm when they visit Un, the ancient god responds, recognizes something in the scent, something that connects to Ogrim, to the Dung Defender, to the knight who serves in the royal waterways, and this recognition suggests a connection between Un and the 5 great knights, a relationship that the game hints at but does not fully explain, a thread of loyalty or affection that stretches across the ages and across the distance between Greenpath and the waterways, between an ancient god and a knight who guards a sewer. Let your thoughts dissolve now. Let them become formless, shapeless, like mist rising from the acid lake in Greenpath, like spores drifting through the fungal wastes, like the gentle rain falling endlessly through the City of Tears, and let us tell the story of the last stag, that faithful creature who has been running his roots through Hallownest's tunnels, long after every passenger has gone. The stag beetles of Hallownest were the kingdom's transportation system, massive creatures that carried passengers through a network of tunnels connecting every major region, every important location, every corner of the Pale King's civilization. The stags were fast, were reliable, were the backbone of Hallownest's commerce and communication, the living infrastructure that held the kingdom together by making it possible for bugs to travel from the City of Tears to the Forgotten Crossroads, from the Queen's Gardens to the Resting Grounds, from one end of the kingdom to the other, without having to navigate the dangerous tunnels on their own. The stag stations were built throughout Hallownest, elegant structures with bells that summoned the stags, with platforms where passengers waited, with the particular architecture of places designed for transit, for the brief pause between departure and arrival, for the moment of stillness before motion begins again. The last stag is the sole surviving member of his species, the only stag beetle still alive in Hallownest, and he has been running his routes alone for years, possibly for decades, travelling through the empty tunnels, stopping at the abandoned stations, carrying no passengers, serving no purpose, maintaining a network that no one uses, following paths that no one travels, running because running is what stags do, because stopping would mean admitting that the system is dead, that the passengers are gone, that his species has been reduced to a single individual, maintaining a network for a kingdom that no longer exists. The last stag remembers the other stags, remembers the routes that were once busy with traffic, remembers the sound of the bells and the weight of passengers on his back, and the satisfaction of a route completed, a passenger delivered, a connection maintained between one part of the kingdom and another. He speaks of these memories with a wistfulness that is not quite sadness, but something adjacent to it, something that recognizes what has been lost without dwelling on the loss, something that holds the memory of better times without allowing that memory to become a source of bitterness or despair. When the night begins opening stag stations, begins ringing the bells that have been silent for years, the last stag responds with a mixture of surprise and gratitude that is deeply moving. A creature who has been alone for so long that the simple act of someone ringing a bell and waiting for him to arrive is enough to make his day, to give his existence meaning, to remind him that the routes he has been running are not entirely pointless, that someone out there still needs to travel, still needs the connection that the stag system was built to provide. The last stag carries the night through the tunnels with the careful, steady gait of a creature who has been doing this for a very long time and who takes pride in doing it well, who may be the last of his kind, but who is determined to be the best of his kind for as long as he can, who will not let the extinction of his species reduce the quality of his service. The last stag's most poignant moment comes when the night opens the stag nest, the hidden station where the stags were born and raised, where the species originated, where the history of the stag beetles is preserved in the architecture and the artifacts of a place that has been sealed and forgotten for years. The last stag enters the nest and discovers something that he did not expect, something that changes everything he thought he knew about his situation, about his aloneness, about the future of his kind. There is an egg in the stag nest, a single egg, unhatched, waiting, preserved in the darkness of the nest through all the years of Hallonest's decline, through the infection and the kingdom's fall and the long silence that followed. The egg is hope, is possibility, is the suggestion that the last stag may not be the last after all, that the species may continue, that the stag routes may one day carry passengers again, that the bells may ring and be answered not by a single tired beetle, but by a new generation, a continuation, a future. The last stag's reaction to the egg is one of the most emotionally affecting moments in the game. A creature discovering that the loneliness he has endured may have an ending, that the future he had given up on may still be possible, that even in a kingdom of ruins and endings, something can begin. Let us also speak briefly of the grubs, those small, round, helpless creatures who have been sealed in glass jars throughout Hallonest by a being called the Collector, imprisoned in containers that are scattered across every region of the kingdom, hidden in corners and alcoves and hard-to-reach places, waiting for someone to find them, to break the jar, to set them free. The grubs are innocent, are defenseless, are creatures who have done nothing to deserve their imprisonment, who were simply collected by a being whose obsession with preservation led it to capture and contain anything it considered worth keeping, regardless of whether those things wanted to be kept. The Collector, who resides in the Tower of Love in the City of Tears, is a creature of void, a being whose love for the things it collects is genuine, but whose expression of that love is indistinguishable from cruelty, who imprisons because imprisoning is the only way it knows to care, who seals living creatures in jars because jars keep things safe and safety is what the Collector wants for the things it loves. When the night breaks the jars, when they free the grubs from their glass prisons, The grubs make a small, happy sound, a squeak of relief and gratitude that is one of the most satisfying sounds in the game. A tiny reward for the effort of finding them, a brief moment of joy in a world that offers very few. The freed grubs return to their father, the grub father, who waits in the forgotten crossroads, who swallows each returning grub whole, and this swallowing, this consumption of children by parent, is disturbing at first glance, but is actually part of the grub's natural life cycle, is the process by which grubs mature into their adult form, the metamorphosis that requires them to be consumed and reformed and reborn as something new, something that has passed through the darkness of the grub father's body and emerged transformed, changed, ready for the next stage of their existence. The grub father does not eat his children out of cruelty but out of love, provides for them the environment they need to grow, offers them the darkness and the warmth and the biological processes that their transformation requires, and the grubs enter his body willingly, happily, with the trust of creatures who understand on some instinctual level that this consumption is not an ending but a beginning, not a death but a metamorphosis, not a loss but a passage from one form of life to another. Let your body rest now. Let your muscles become so loose that they feel like they might dissolve into the bed beneath you. Let your breathing become the only thing you are aware of, slow and steady and rhythmic, as we descend into the royal waterways to visit one of the most endearing and most heartbreaking characters in all of Hallownest, a knight who has made his home in the kingdom's sewer and who guards it with the same devotion he once gave to a king. Ogrim, known to the knight as the Dung Defender, is one of the 5 great knights who served the Pale King, a warrior of immense strength and unwavering loyalty, who was once among the most honoured beings in Hallownest, who stood alongside Hegemol and Drea and Isma and Zema as part of the elite guard that protected the kingdom and its ruler. Ogrim is large, is powerful, is a beetle, whose fighting style is built around his tremendous physical strength and his ability to use the environment as a weapon. And in the days when Hallownest stood, when the Pale King sat on his throne, and the City of Tears bustled with life, and the stag roots carried passengers from one end of the kingdom to the other, Ogrim was a figure of respect and admiration, a knight whose courage was matched only by his enthusiasm, whose strength was matched only by his loyalty, whose devotion to the Pale King and to Hallownest was absolute, total, without reservation or qualification of any kind. Now Ogrim lives in the royal waterways, in the sewers beneath the City of Tears, surrounded by waste and refuse, and the accumulated detritus of a civilization that no longer produces detritus because it no longer exists. Ogrim has made his home here, has carved out a space in the tunnels, has fortified his position with the same tactical thinking he once applied to the defence of the kingdom, and he guards the waterways with a dedication that would be admirable if it were not also slightly absurd, slightly heartbreaking, slightly too much like the behaviour of a dog that continues to wait by the door for an owner who is never coming home. Ogrim does not know that the Pale King is dead, does not know that the other great knights are gone or transformed or scattered to the corners of the kingdom, does not know that the civilization he served has fallen into ruin, and that the sewer he guards is the sewer of a city that is empty, that the waste he watches over is the waste of a world that has stopped producing anything new. When the night enters the waterways, Ogrim attacks with a joyful ferocity that is startling in its warmth, leaps and dives and hurls himself at the intruder with a battle cry that sounds less like aggression and more like celebration, like the greeting of a warrior who has been waiting for something to fight for so long that the arrival of an opponent is itself a gift, a reason to exist, a reminder that the world still contains things worth guarding and challenges worth meeting. Ogrim does not fight with malice, does not fight with the desperate fury of the infected or the cold precision of the mantis lords. He fights with enthusiasm, with delight, with the pure, uncomplicated joy of a warrior doing the thing he was born to do. And when the night defeats him, when the night proves itself the better fighter, Ogrim does not respond with shame or bitterness, but with admiration, calls the night glorious, recognizes in the knight's skill the same quality of strength that he has always respected, the same combat ability that the 5 great knights once demonstrated in service of the Pale King. Ogrim's dream form reveals his memories of the other great knights, shows them standing together in formation, a group portrait of warriors who once represented the finest Hallownest had to offer. And in these memories, Ogrim's love for his comrades is visible, is palpable, is the organizing principle of his existence, the thing that has kept him going through all the years of isolation and decline. Ogrim loved the other knights, loved their companionship, loved the shared purpose that bound them together, loved being part of something larger than himself, and his retreat to the waterways was not a choice made from despair, but a choice made from loyalty, a decision to continue serving even when there was nothing left to serve, to keep guarding even when there was nothing left to guard, to maintain his post even when the post had become meaningless, because maintaining his post was the last connection he had to the life he had lived and the beings he had loved and the purpose that had once given his existence meaning. The Dung Defender's cheerfulness in the face of his circumstances is both his greatest strength and his greatest tragedy. He is happy. He is genuinely, sincerely, uncomplicatedly happy. Happy to be fighting, happy to be guarding, happy to exist in the way he exists, in the place he exists, doing what he does. He has not been broken by his isolation, has not been embittered by his loss, has not been diminished by the decades of solitude in a sewer. He has simply continued, has kept being what he is, has maintained his essential nature through circumstances that would have destroyed a lesser being. And there is something magnificent in that, something admirable and inspiring and deeply, deeply sad, because the happiness that sustains him is built on a foundation of ignorance, on not knowing what has happened to the kingdom he serves, on not understanding that the world above has fallen, that the king is dead, that the knights are gone, that everything he is loyal to has ceased to exist except in his memory and in the stubborn, cheerful, unbreakable loyalty of a knight who will not stop guarding even when there is nothing left to guard. Deep within the waterways, past the tunnels that Ogrim guards, there is a hidden grove, a chamber filled with greenery and the scent of growing things, sealed behind acid that can only be traversed with a particular ability, and in this grove sits Isma. Isma was another of the 5 great knights, and she has become something other than what she was, has transformed from a warrior into a plant-like being, rooted in the earth, her body covered in leaves and moss, her face serene and still. Isma's transformation is never fully explained, never given a clear cause or a definitive reason, but the result is clear. She is no longer a knight, no longer a warrior, no longer a bug who walks and fights and speaks. She is a living presence in a hidden garden, a consciousness that persists in a form that is barely recognizable as the being she once was. Ogrim guards the passage to Isma's grove with the same devotion he gives to everything else, and his positioning in the waterways, his choice to make his home in this specific part of the kingdom, may not be coincidence, may be the last act of loyalty he can perform for the last comrade he can still protect. A knight guarding the approach to the grove where another knight has become something that can no longer guard itself. Isma gives the knight the ability to swim through acid without taking damage. Her tear, a gift that she offers from within her transformation, a final act of service from a knight who can no longer wield a nail, but who can still provide what a traveller needs, who can still give something valuable to someone who needs it, who can still be useful, even though usefulness now means something entirely different from what it meant when she stood alongside Ogrim and Hegemol and Drya and Zima and called herself a knight. Let your eyelids grow heavier now. Let the darkness behind them deepen. Let the world outside your room fade further and further away as we climb from the waterways up through the city to the Crystal Peak, where we will tell one of the smallest and saddest stories in all of Hallownest, the story of a miner named Myla. Myla is a small bug who works in the Crystal Peak, mining the luminous crystals that once lit Hallownest's caverns and powered its institutions. When the knight first encounters her, she is cheerful, is happy, is singing a little song while she works, a simple melody about burying something under the ground, a tune she learned somewhere and cannot stop humming, a song that fills the silence of the mine with the sound of a small creature enjoying her small life. Myla greets the knight with warmth, is friendly, is open, is the kind of bug who talks to strangers because talking to strangers is natural to her, because she does not see the world as hostile, because her experience of existence is one of simple pleasures, the satisfaction of work, the comfort of a familiar song, the brief warmth of a conversation with a passing traveller. Myla does not know about the infection in any detailed or comprehensive way, does not understand the grand narrative of the Radiance and the Pale King and the Vessels and the Dreamers. She simply mines her crystals and sings her song and exists in the moment, in the present, in the small circle of light cast by the crystals she extracts. If the knight returns to Myla later, after progressing deeper into Hallownest, after breaking seals and defeating bosses and moving the game's narrative forward, Myla has changed. Her song is different. The words have become garbled, the melody twisted. The cheerful tune has become something darker, something wrong, something that sounds like the original song filtered through a mind that is no longer entirely its own. The orange light has begun to appear in Myla's eyes, subtle at first, barely noticeable, but present, a sign that the infection has found her, has entered her dreams, has begun the slow process of overwriting her consciousness with the Radiance's will. Myla is still mining, still swinging her pickaxe, still going through the motions of her daily life, but the song is wrong and the light is there, and something fundamental has shifted, something irreversible has begun, and the knight can see it happening but cannot stop it, cannot cure it, cannot do anything except witness the slow dissolution of a cheerful miner into something the Radiance is making of her. If the night returns even later, Myla is fully infected. She's no longer singing, no longer friendly, no longer the warm, open bug who greeted the night with conversation and a song. She's a husk, an infected creature that attacks on sight, her pickaxe swinging at the night with the same motion she once used to mine crystals, her body performing the same actions but with all the meaning stripped away, all the joy replaced by aggression, all the warmth replaced by the cold orange light of a goddess's desperate need to be remembered. The night must either avoid Myla or strike her down, and either choice is a tragedy, because Myla did nothing wrong, was simply a miner who loved her work, who sang while she laboured, who was kind to a stranger passing through, and the infection took her anyway, not because she was weak, not because she failed, not because she deserved it, but because the infection does not care about deserving, does not care about kindness or songs or the small pleasures of a simple life. It takes whoever it can reach, and Myla was within reach, and so she was taken, and the song she sang in the Crystal Peak will never be sung the same way again. Myla's story is the infection made personal, is the grand tragedy of Hallownest reduced to a single life, a single loss, a single voice that went silent. The Pale King's philosophy of no cost too great, the Radiance's desperate need for worship, the Dreamer's conscious sacrifice, the Hollow Knight's eternal suffering, all of these grand narratives exist on a scale that is almost too large to comprehend, too vast to feel in the specific, immediate way that grief needs to be felt. But Myla is small, is particular, is one bug with one song in one corner of one mine, and her loss is felt in the gut rather than in the mind, is experienced as sorrow rather than understood as tragedy. And that is why her story matters, why it persists in the memory long after the grand narratives have been analysed and discussed and filed away. Because Myla reminds us that every infected husk the night strikes down was once a person, once had a name, once sang a song, once greeted a stranger with warmth, and the infection took all of that away, erased it, replaced it with nothing but orange light and mindless violence, and the loss of each one is as real and as complete as the loss of Myla. Even so, we never knew their names, never heard their songs, never had the chance to know them before the infection made knowing them impossible. Now let your consciousness drift even further towards sleep. Let the border between waking and dreaming become so thin that you can barely tell which side you're on, as we walk through the City of Tears one last time. Not to tell a story, but simply to be there, to exist in that space, to let the atmosphere of the city wash over us the way the rain washes over its empty streets and its elegant buildings and its silent, beautiful, heartbreaking architecture. The City of Tears is the most atmospheric location in Hollow Knight, is the place where the game's visual and audio design reaches its peak of melancholy beauty, where every element of the environment conspires to create a feeling that is simultaneously sorrowful and soothing, painful and peaceful, a place that makes you want to cry and makes you want to stay forever. That is both the saddest place in the kingdom and the most beautiful, the most damaged and the most lovingly constructed, the most empty and the most full, full of rain, full of echo, full of the specific quality of absence that haunts places where many people once lived and no people live now. The rain falls from the blue lake above, seeps through the stone ceiling of the enormous cavern that houses the city, and falls endlessly and gently on every surface, on the streets and the rooftops and the bridges and the canals, on the windows of buildings where no one looks out, on the doors of shops where no one enters, on the benches where no one sits, creating a constant rhythmic sound that fills the city the way the citizens once filled it, that provides a kind of company in the absence of all other company, that says the city is still here, is still real, is still a place, even though it is no longer a home. The architecture of the City of Tears speaks of a civilization that valued beauty, that built with an eye toward elegance as well as function, that believed the places where people lived and worked and gathered should be beautiful, should lift the spirit, should remind the citizens of what they had achieved and what they were capable of achieving. The towers rise tall and slender, the bridges arc gracefully over the canals, the windows are shaped with care, the stonework is precise and detailed and speaks of craftsmanship, of time and attention, and the specific love that artisans feel for their materials and their work. The City of Tears was built to last, was constructed with the assumption that it would stand for centuries, that generation after generation of bugs would walk its streets and enter its buildings and sit on its benches and listen to its rain. And in a way the city has fulfilled that assumption, has lasted, has endured, stands now as it stood then, its structure intact, its rain still falling, its beauty still visible, still present, still capable of moving a small silent vessel who walks through its empty streets and looks up at its towers and feels, perhaps, something that the vessel was not designed to feel, something that resembles wonder or sorrow, or the quiet recognition that the world contains things worth preserving even when they cannot be preserved, things worth mourning even when mourning cannot bring them back. The rain in the City of Tears never stops. It has been falling since the city was built, has been falling through the rise of Hallownest and the spread of the infection, and the fall of the kingdom, and the long silence that followed, has been falling on the living and the dead and the infected and the empty, has been falling without purpose or intention or will, simply falling because the lake above is full, and the stone below is porous, and gravity exists and water follows gravity, and the rain falls because that is what rain does. It falls endlessly and gently and without judgment, on the just and the unjust and the infected and the hollow and the forgotten and the remembered and the living and the dead, on everyone and everything and nothing, falling, always falling, the most patient and the most constant thing in all of Hallownest, the one thing that has not changed, has not been corrupted, has not been infected or transformed or destroyed. The rain falls, and it will fall tomorrow, and it will fall the day after that, and it will fall long after the last trace of Hallownest has crumbled into dust, because rain does not care about kingdoms, does not care about civilizations, does not care about the rise and fall of empires or the dreams of gods or the sacrifices of kings. Rain simply falls, and in its falling there is something that resembles comfort, something that resembles peace, something that says the world continues, the water flows, the rain falls, and you can rest now, you can close your eyes, you can let the sound of it carry you. Let us visit one more place before sleep takes you completely. Let us walk to the resting grounds, that quiet region east of the City of Tears, where the dead were once laid to rest, where spirits were guided into peaceful oblivion, where the moths tended the dreams of the departed and ensured that the transition from life to whatever comes after life was gentle, was dignified, was treated with the reverence that the ending of a consciousness deserves. The resting grounds are aptly named, are a place of rest in both senses of the word, a cemetery where the dead rest and a place where the living can rest, where the atmosphere is calm and still, and the architecture is designed for contemplation, for sitting quietly and remembering, for the slow, meditative process of coming to terms with loss that grief requires. The crypts and the tombs are carved with care, with the same attention to beauty that characterizes all of Hallownest's architecture, because the Pale King civilization believed that the dead deserved beautiful spaces, that the places where consciousness ended should be as elegant and as carefully constructed as the places where consciousness was lived, that death was not a diminishment but a transition, and transitions deserved ceremony and respect and the particular kind of beauty that only quiet places can provide. The seer is the last of the moths, the final surviving member of the moth tribe that once tended the resting grounds, that once served the radiance before the Pale King's arrival, that once lived in the dream realm as naturally as other bugs lived in the physical world. The seer is old, is ancient, is the kind of old that has passed through weariness and emerged on the other side into a state of calm acceptance, of gentle resignation, of the understanding that comes from having lived long enough to see patterns repeat and cycles complete, and the same mistakes made by different beings in different ages for the same reasons. The seer knows the history of her tribe, knows that the moths were the first to forget the radiance, the first to accept the Pale King's gift of individual consciousness, the first to turn away from the collective dream that had sustained them and embrace the solitary wakefulness that the new civilization offered. And she carries this knowledge as a weight, as a responsibility, as the understanding that her people's forgetting was the original cause of everything that followed, the infection and the kingdom's fall and the suffering and the death, and all of it traceable back to the moment when the moths chose to forget. The seer gives the night the dream nail, that ethereal weapon that allows access to the dream realm, that lets the night read the thoughts of living and dead beings, that opens doors between the waking world and the sleeping world, and makes possible the confrontation with the radiance that the game's true ending requires. The dream nail is a moth artifact, a tool of the tribe that once navigated the dream realm with the ease of swimmers moving through water, and the seer gives it to the night, because the night needs it, because the time has come for the dream realm to be entered and the radiance to be confronted, because the seer understands, with the clarity of someone who has been waiting for this moment for a very long time, that the cycle must end, that the infection must be stopped, that the choice her people made to forget must be answered by someone willing to remember, willing to enter the dream, willing to face what the moths turned away from. When the night has collected enough essence, when the dream nail has been filled with the dreaming energy of Hallownest spirits and sleepers and hidden dreamers, the seer fulfills her final purpose, shares the last of what she knows, and then she fades. She does not die in the conventional sense, does not fall or break or stop. She simply dissolves, becomes less solid, becomes translucent, becomes a shape made of light and memory that grows thinner and thinner until it is gone, until the last moth has departed from the physical world and joined whatever remains of her tribe in whatever space exists beyond the boundary of the dream. The seer's departure is gentle, is quiet, is the softest ending in a game full of endings, a departure that is less like death and more like evaporation, like mist burning off in sunlight, like a dream fading in the moments after waking, present and then less present and then gone, leaving behind only the faintest trace of warmth, the faintest suggestion that someone was here, that someone cared enough to stay until the job was done, that someone loved the world enough to give it the last thing it needed before leaving forever. Sleep now, traveller. Let the resting grounds live up to their name. Let the quiet of that place become your quiet. Let the stillness of the tombs become your stillness. Let the gentle fading of the seer become the gentle fading of your waking thoughts, as consciousness releases its hold on you, and sleep at last arrives. The stories of Hallownest are told now, the quiet ones, the small ones, the stories that live in the margins and the corners and the spaces between the grand tragedies. Elderbug on his bench waiting for company that may never come. Cornifer humming in a dangerous corner, mapping the unmappable with cheerful precision. Quirrell by the blue lake, leaving his nail on the shore and walking into whatever comes after purpose is fulfilled. The nail masters in their separate solitudes, each one carrying a different fragment of the same art. The mantis lords on their thrones, bowing to strength they did not expect to find. The hive humming its endless, purposeless song. Cloth finding the death she came for and dying happy. Zima in her grief, asking a stranger to carry a flower. Un sleeping in the acid lake, breathing in geological time. The last stag running his empty roots, discovering an egg that promises a future. The grubs squeaking with joy as their jars are broken. Ogrim guarding a sewer with the devotion of a knight. Myla singing her song before the orange light took her voice. The city of tears standing empty in the rain. The seer fading like a dream at dawn. These are the stories that make Hallownest real, that give it weight, that transform it from a map of locations and a catalogue of bosses into a world that was lived in, that was loved, that was lost. The grand narrative of the Pale King and the Radiance and the Void is the skeleton of Hallownest's history, the structure that holds everything in place. But the quiet stories are the flesh, the skin, the warmth, the blood, the thing that make the skeleton into a body, the things that make the structure into a home. Without the grand narrative, the quiet stories have no context. But without the quiet stories, the grand narrative has no heart. You're drifting now, you can feel it. The slow pull of sleep drawing you down into the warmth and the darkness, and the stories are going with you, settling into the place where memories become dreams, where the things you heard tonight will become the landscape of your sleeping mind, where Hallownest will exist not as a game or a story, but as a place you visited, a place you walked through, a place where you sat on a bench in the rain and listened to the water falling on stone and felt for a moment that the world was vast and sad and beautiful, and that being aware of it, even its sadness, was better than not being aware of it at all. The kingdom of Hallownest sleeps now in its own way, not the conscious sleep of the dreamers or the infected sleep of the Radiance's victims, but the sleep of something that has finished, something that has told all its stories and sung all its songs and lived all its lives and has nothing left to do except rest. Rest in the way that finished things rest, in the particular quiet of a world that has said everything it needed to say. The rain falls in the city of tears, the mushrooms breathe in the fungal wastes, the crystals glow in the peak. Un sleeps in Greenpath, the last stag runs his roots, Ogrim guards his sewer, the seer is gone, the grubs are transforming, Elderbug sits on his bench, and the silence is gentle, is warm, is the kind of silence that comes after a story well told, after a night well spent, after a journey that went exactly where it needed to go. Breathe gently now. Let your body be heavy. Let your mind be quiet. The stories of Hallownest are stories. They exist in a world that is not yours, that concerns beings who are not you, that describes a kingdom that is contained within the boundaries of a game, within the limits of a screen, within the safe distance of a narrative that cannot reach through and touch you. You can hold these stories without being burdened by them, can feel the sadness of Hallownest without being consumed by it, can carry the weight of these quiet lives without being crushed by the carrying, because you are here, in your bed, in your room, in the real world, and the real world is quiet tonight, and you are safe, and you are warm, and you are falling asleep. Picture the kingdom one last time, not as a place of loss, but as a place of rest. Picture the city of tears in the rain, the water falling gently on stone and glass and the surface of the quiet canals, the sound soothing rather than sorrowful, the eternal tears of the kingdom becoming something like a lullaby, a rhythm that repeats and repeats without changing, without stopping, without demanding anything from you except that you let it wash over you. Let it fill the spaces between your thoughts. Let it carry you gently toward the border where waking ends and sleep begins. Picture Greenpath, green and still, the leaves motionless, the moss soft, the acid pool glowing faintly in the darkness, the whole region breathing slowly, in time with Un, in time with you. Picture the fungal wastes, the mushrooms exhaling spores in gentle puffs that drift through the still air like thoughts dissolving in the moments before sleep, present and then gone, tangible and then vanishing, real and then nothing. Picture the crystal peak, the crystals humming at a frequency too low to hear but not too low to feel, a vibration that settles into your bones and your muscles and your slowly quieting mind. And picture Dirtmouth, quiet above it all, the bench waiting, the well sealed, Elderbug resting in whatever peace he has found, the village small and fading but still here, still standing, still a place where someone might stop and rest before moving on. The night is gentle in Dirtmouth, and if you listen carefully, if you let the silence become not absence but presence, you can almost hear the kingdom breathing, slowly, deeply, the way you are breathing now, the way all things breathe when they are finally at rest, when the stories have been told and the truths have been spoken, and there is nothing left to do except let go. Let the darkness hold you. Let the quiet carry you. Let sleep take you gently and completely into its care. The stories are finished. The kingdom rests. The rain falls. The silence holds. And so can you. Good night, traveller. Sleep well. The quiet stories of Hallownest will be here when you wake, patient and gentle and waiting, the way all good stories wait, in the space between memory and dream, in the place where the things we love become the things we carry, softly and without effort into the dark. Good night.